Okay, without further ado, we're so blessed that Rebbetzin Schoonmaker is here, and yesterday's class gave women so much to talk about and so much to think about. Thank you so much. So we're really looking forward to your next class.
Thank you so much, everyone. I just have to say, I just told Rebbetzin Schmidman that I've been hearing nonstop about the Women's Initiative of Learning Nach Yomi that Rebbetzin Schmidman initiated. Is something that I interview 12th graders who tell me they do this in their free time, seminary students who feel they need to catch up on Nach, newly marrieds who are in Eretz Yisrael and have nothing to do and want to do something important, and people are mamish learning Hashem's Torah, and it's so beautiful and very, very special. So I personally thank you for the beautiful, beautiful initiative. Okay, our topic for today is, it's not a continuation of yesterday, it's a different angle of the issues that we as people in Chinuch have to deal with. And I would like to introduce with another story that I'm saying this, I just came straight from Project Inspire, this very, very beautiful Kiruv-oriented Shabbos in New York. And they always have a Motzei Shabbos program with something very, very, very powerful, encouraging people to reach out to other Yidden and really make connections. So I need to share my own personal involvement with this, that a few years ago, not a few years ago, it was right after October 7th. I live in Eretz Yisrael. People were absolutely devastated by, the events of October 7th. And every so often, somebody would send me or show me an interview that would really go straight into my heart. It's a very, very loaded topic. My sons are Haredi Yeshiva Bachrim, who sit and learn Al Taras HaKodesh, who really, really believe that they're protecting Klal Yisrael with their learning. And we have Chayalim who go out there and give up their lives for Klal Yisrael. And sometimes the lack of understanding and the lack of Noseh B'ol that exists is very, very, very painful. I can mamish cry about it as I talk about it. So every so often somebody shows me something to, give me a certain chizuk. I was shown an interview with a very young chayal. He was maybe 19 years old. And a few weeks into the war, he was injured and his leg was amputated. So there's this young person, he looks maybe 15, he couldn't be 15, he probably was 19, and he's sitting in a wheelchair with one leg. And he's talking about the fact that he's going to spend the rest of his life with one leg. And he said something, it was a very short thing, and it went into my heart. He said to the interviewer, I'll tell you, if Klal Yisrael would stop fighting, if the Jewish people, I forgot to mention, totally secular, not religious, no sign of any Judaism on him. If the Jewish people will finally be at peace with each other and would love each other, I would spend the rest of my life with one leg. It was worth losing my leg. And he says, and I see, and this was early in the war, I see people coming together, people caring more. It was worth it. And it went into my heart very much. I told this story many times over. Maybe some people have even heard me say this story because it's, in my mind, one of the most powerful things I experienced in the past few years. I sat down to prepare a class a few days later, and I come across the Chazal in Shabbos Lamed Aleph, a Chazal that we're all familiar with, where a man comes to Hillel and says, teach me the whole Torah while standing on one foot. And what is Hillel's answer? Dalechasani l'chavercha lo tavid. Don't fight with each other, love each other. Care about other people. Don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. And my associative brain is thinking that this young man says, I'll live my whole life with one leg if we care about each other. And thousands of years ago, Hillel said the whole Torah on one foot is let's care about each other. So it stayed in my mind. I didn't even know the name of this young man, but I decided to work with my students on a project of Achdos. And if we focus on the words of the Chazal, here Chazal don't say v'hatoecha kamocha, and it's not talking about chesed. It's talking about understanding the mindset of another person. Dalachasani, what you don't want done to you, don't do to others. I don't have to agree with your ashkafa. I don't have to be the same as you. I just have to care about you enough to take 1 second to think about your metzias and to know how I would want to be treated if I was in your Metzius. That's what Chazal is saying. So I started a whole thing, a whole project of Ben Adam Chavero among my students for them to be more compassionate towards each other, towards others. And I told them we're doing this as a schus, somebody who lost their leg, protecting other people, asked that we should be ba'achdos. Anyway, I went to Project Inspire 2 years ago, and they asked me to give a shir that they called Treasures Found in Gaza. Different nikudos that I learned from the war that I wanted to share at the convention. I told this story, and as I told it, a girl who was sitting in the audience runs out of the room. I noticed that the girl who ran out of the room was one of the organizers, one of the head people who run Project Inspire. His daughter was sitting there. She runs out of the room. I finished my shir, and I noticed that he, the head of the whole program, is standing at the door with his arms folded, waiting for me to come out. I said, uh-oh, I'm in trouble with the principal. I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm in trouble with the principal. I walk out, and he says to me, did somebody show you that interview with this young man who lost his leg? I said, yes. He said, well, I saw it too. And now I'm going to tell you something that you can't tell any of the 1,000 people at this convention. I was so moved by this young man that I went to Tel Shomer, the hospital for rehabilitation. I went there 4 times to convince him to come to New York to this convention. He's hiding on the 3rd floor, and nobody knows he's here. And on Motzei Shabbos, he's going to come out and talk about Achdus. I was very, very moved. I said, I've been working on all my students. I said, this is a nameless person to me, and he's of all places in Stamford, Connecticut, on the 3rd floor. And then he says to me, maybe you could do a mitzvah now. He says, this boy is totally Chiloni, totally Israeli, doesn't know what he's doing here with the 1,000 from people. You're Israeli, I'm Israeli. Can you just give him a little chizuk? So he sends him out to the hall, and out comes this person, limping. He didn't even have his prosthetics yet. He's limping. He's with his thing. He's leaning against the wall. I said, what am I going to say to this young person from a totally different, what am I going to say to him? I said to him, I have to tell you something. I said, I have hundreds of students who are working on Avos Yisrael because of you. And then I said, should I tell them about the Chazal and Shabbos Lamed Aleph or not? Is it tactful? Is it not? I said, you know what? Tell him. I said, it says in the Gemara, he says to me, Mazda Gemara. He lives in Eretz Yisrael, doesn't know what a Gemara is. I tell him it's an ancient holy text, and I tell him, and Hillel, he says, Miza Hillel. Doesn't know anything. So I told him, and then I said this line that Hillel said that the whole Torah, standing on one foot, is Dalecha Sani L'Chavercha Lo Tavid. I translated to him for Hebrew, Masha Sanoi Alecha Al Taseh L'Chaverecha. He says to me, voila, very Israeli. He says to me, Tilshemili et hadavar ze al daf ani rotzeh et ze bakish sheli. I want to carry those words of Chazal in my pocket. And he got up, Motzei Shabbos. He surprised the crowd. He limped up to the front and spoke about Achdus, and spoke about how it was the first time in his life he ever met from Jews. He had to come to New York to have the exposure, Connecticut actually, and he got a standing ovation from 1,000 people. I think often about that makor, Dalecha Sani L'Chavercha Lo Tavid, and what it requires from us. So what I want to speak about today is really one of the main associations I have with that source is the concept of no sebom chavero, to bear the burden of another person. I may not have any actual contact with you, but I have to understand your reality. And I think that in today's world, especially I live in Eretz Yisrael, there's so much divisiveness that sometimes you're scared. You're scared to think of the reality of another child. Happens to be my Masbin Yeshiva Bachar is a very big istinus, and he showers all the time, daily. And I said to him, imagine a chayal who's an istinus like you, who hasn't taken off his boots for 2 weeks, living in the same socks. I wanted to understand this. Even though I'm very, very happy I raised my children a certain way, But Klal Yisrael has many, many different people who go through different things. And just to take a second to understand the metzius of another person. So no sabom chavero, I find with chinuch, and I'm sure all of you can give this speech instead of me, is really understanding the mindset of kids who are different than us, parents who are different than us, people. I was always a goody two-shoes in school. How do I deal with a child who has a rebellious streak? Or somebody who has a hard time with authority? I don't understand what it is. And the Alter of Kelm says that the midah of no sabom chavero, in order to have this midah, you need a certain ability. He calls it hafshatat hatsurot, which means abstract thinking. Hafshata means abstraction. If you can't think abstractly, you can't be nosabo. Because if you're my age, at my stage, on my hashkafa, then I understand you. But if you're from a different walk of life, how am I supposed to understand you? Abstract thinking. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the Alter of Kelm on this midah. So he says, we, Chazal and Yevamos, Ayin Tes, Chaval say that we have distinct midos. We are Baishanim, Rachmanim, and Gomlei Chasadim. Now, Rachamim is a very interesting midah. It's a beautiful, beautiful midah. But the problem with Rachamim is that it comes involuntarily, and it comes sometimes in overdoses and sometimes in underdoses. You could have a student who shares with you something that they're going through, and it touches you in a certain kind of way that this student is on your mind all day. You could have another student who has a struggle, and they talk to you, and it doesn't really move you so much. Because Rachamim is not something that we control. It's emotional. I always bring the example. If a child tells me they're being bullied, I can't think of anything else. It's overdose even. I'm supposed to be doing other things, and I'm thinking about them. If a child tells me they're bored, I have no patience for boredom. I'll tell my children, I'll say, read a book, peel some potatoes, you know. I'm not, but boredom for some people is a real thing. So Noah Sabom Chavero is not coming from the emotional world. The Alter of Kelm says it's Amal HaSechel v'Hatzior. The hard work of the Sechel and of the imagination. Amal HaSechel v'Hatzior. I have to think, what is your reality? What is going on with you? I have to get into your head a little bit to understand your reality. And he says that anybody who can't think abstractly will have a very hard time doing this. So this is the avoda. The avoda is to be able to abstractly understand the reality of another person. I started working on this midah during COVID. My father, in passing, said a comment to me that probably since the time of the Mabul, there was no event that affected the entire world like COVID did. And it made me think that we have something in common with every Bria in the world, even though they're very different than us. So I started thinking about, how does COVID affect an old man who lives by himself? How does COVID affect a young girl who just started first grade and started making friends and can't go to school? How does it affect the ADD child who needs to get out? How does it affect the older single who lives mamish by themselves and needs social? You can go so many places with abstract understanding of what is this reality for somebody who's different than me. The young mother with many pitzlach in the house. There's so many people who experience this thing differently. So I was giving a Zoom class on this topic, and we were talking about thinking abstractly. And we were thinking that noticeable sometimes has to be done for people who live very far from you, but sometimes it's for your very own child in your own house who just relates to the world very differently than you. You love them, but you don't understand them sometimes. And noticeable is about understanding them. So a woman unmutes herself, and she says, I have an example. I need hadracha. She says, I think this woman lives in Queens. She says, I am, at the time, COVID was very active then. She says, there are levayas all the time. There are ambulances going on my house all the time. For me, this is a crisis. She says, I daven, I say Tehillim, I worry, I feel like I'm going through a mamash, a terrible, terrible tzara. She says, my daughter, who lives in a different place, calls me up, a married daughter, and she says to me, I can't handle COVID anymore. I just can't handle it, can't handle it. It's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. And the mother says, Taka, it's terrible, it's terrible. The girl says, it's terrible. I haven't had a gel manicure in the longest time. She puts up her fingers, this woman. She says, I don't have a gel manicure. And she says, I couldn't understand my daughter that I'm saying it's terrible and I'm talking about levias. She's saying it's terrible and she's talking about gel manicures. She said, I was so angry. She says, but it's my daughter. And I have to understand her better. So help me be Nosa Ba'ol with somebody whose big concern is that she hasn't had a manicure recently. So I said, okay, excellent material for us to work with. Let's work with this material. I said to her, and I'm going to call this exercise because I try to use it a lot in chinuch. I call this the Nosa Ba'ol equal signs. I said to her, what does a gel manicure mean to your daughter? So she was quiet for a second because I don't think she ever thought about it. And she said, it's probably like a mood boost, a pick-me-up, something that kind of puts her in a good mood. I said, okay, very good. Now let's use the equal signs. What is a mood boost in your world? What picks you up? So she says to me, Tehillim, davening. I said, don't be so frum on me right now. Give me a physical thing that puts you in a good mood. So she says to me, a hot cup of coffee, a nice hot shower. I said, good. Now we take the equal signs back. How would you feel if COVID affected hot water and you were not able to have a hot shower or a hot cup of coffee for months? She said, oh boy, would I be a kvetch. I said, exactly. Now you can be Nosa Ba'ol. Nosa Ba'ol M'chavero. Oh, I'm calling it the equal signs, the Nosa Ba'ol equal signs, meaning what's equal in my world and your world. So that's all she needed, was to understand that this girl is missing her mood boost. COVID was not affecting my lady badly because she gets to have her coffee and her hot shower. But now she doesn't have to agree. She has to understand that there are people who couldn't have their mood boost. I ended that class, and as a teacher, I say to myself sometimes, "Kshot atzmecha." First, correct yourself before you start correcting other people. And I say, do I need to use the Nosa Ba'ol equal signs with anybody in my family? And I realized that I've been having this ongoing conversation with my teenage daughter, who throughout COVID was saying to me, Mommy, I have to get out, I have to get out. At that time in Eretz Yisrael, the rules were incredibly strict. You couldn't leave for more than 100 meters past your house. There was actually a police car at the end of my block. To think how we lived at that time is pretty amazing. And she keeps saying to me, I have to get out, I have to get out. So I said to her, it's a pandemic. Not that much sympathy from me. I said to her, well, why don't you go sit in the garden? Like there's a tree in front of the house. Just get out of the house and go sit there. It's within 100 meters. She says to me, no, I have to go somewhere with these people. I need to go to Geula, to Me'esha'arim, someplace. So with all my dripping cynicism, I said, well, that's what a pandemic means, is that we don't socialize publicly with people, She wasn't getting any rachamim from me. And then I realized that I have to use the equal signs. And I don't know what planet I was living on, but for the first 15 years of this child's life, I did not realize that she is a classic extrovert. Extroverts get fueled by social interactions. It may be surprising to you, but I'm actually more of an introvert. And introverts get fueled by reading a book quietly. COVID was working very well for me. I was teaching out of my house and then going to my room and closing my door. COVID was not working for her because her battery was not being recharged. So when I used the equal signs, I said, what would I feel like if COVID created a situation where you were not allowed to be in your own home and I had to sit on Rehov Malchei Yisrael for 3 months in a row, I think I'd be going out of my mind. Now, for the first time, I understood her. Because Nosa Ba'ol is to think abstractly what's going on in this person's mind and what's the equivalent for me. Ladies, I have to tell you that this concept of Nosa Ba'ol affects me so much in my public world of chinuch, because students are from a different generation. We all know that the generations change every 5 minutes. The struggles, the even the terminology, the words they use, the things that are on their mind, their attitudes. And I'm taking myself and I'm trying to understand them, but I'm not understanding them. I have to get into their mindset. And I may disagree with some of their things, but I need to understand where they're coming from. I live in an area in Yerushalayim where many women don't work. And I have been working full days in chinuch since the beginning of my married life. And a neighbor actually said to me one day, she's having a hard day. She says to me, why? She didn't get her second nap today. She has a morning nap and an afternoon nap, and she missed one of them, and she's feeling a little bit tired. I'm thinking to myself, can you define the word nap? I don't think actually the first time I took a nap was yesterday when I crashed after the session. I was like, wow, an afternoon nap. My first thought was, I can't believe you're saying this to me. But I want to say something, and this is something that I say to my Talmidos all the time. I learned this from Rabbi Dr. Twersky, Alav Shalom. Your primary responses have no bechira. If you're annoyed at what the student is telling you, or shocked, or bothered, or anything else, primary responses have no bechira. You don't say, I think I want to choose to be annoyed now, let's be annoyed. He says, therefore, your secondary response is where your bechira starts. I use this all the time. I say, this is coming from Rabbi Dr. Twersky, Alav Shalom. He says that many from women, you know what their secondary response is? To be upset at themselves about their primary response. What's wrong with you? Why are you acting this way? He says, no, it is what it is. It's your chomer. It's what Hashem gave you. Some people have a lower tolerance threshold. Some people get jealous. Some people get competitive. But now that I'm already feeling this way, what am I going to do about it? So my first thought was I was actually annoyed at that neighbor for the insensitivity of saying to me that she didn't get her second nap. But then I moved on. And the secondary thought was Nosa Ba'om Chavero. I said, you can do this, Dina. Use the equal signs. Her body is programmed to have 2 naps. When she doesn't have the second nap, she feels tired. My body is programmed to have a certain amount of sleep at night. I won't say how much. It's a little embarrassing, not too much. But if I get less than that, I also feel tired. It's just a matter of your body programming. So I need to understand her not getting her second nap. It's like me not getting a certain amount of sleep at night. I can understand that. I don't have to agree. I have to understand. And the Alter of Kelm says that this midah is not just a ben adam l'chavero midah. It's also a ben adam la'atzmo midah. It makes you a wider person. You can talk to many different people, and they could be so different than you, but you could understand. You're just a wide person. And also, it's a ben adam lamakom midah. The Rebbetzin Shalom does this for us all the time. And I want to share 2 sources. One source is very practical. In Shmos, the pasuk says, "V'tachas raglav kemase livnas hasapir." Mefarshim say that Hashem held something that reminded him of the brick of the Shiabud of Mitzrayim. Ki'ilu, the Rebbetzin Shalom needs a physical prop to remind him of something. But he did it in order to always kivyachol be reminded. And sometimes we have a physical thing that we think, oh, this is what this person must feel like. I tell my students, I say, you're watching an old lady walk down the street carrying her groceries. Just take for a second something that's way too heavy for you, hold it for a second, and you'll know how she feels with her little 2 bottles of milk. So maybe you'll go over to her and actually take the bag out of her hand. But sometimes you have to put it on your own body for a second to feel. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Chazal, the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu mamish picked up the bricks, the boulders, in order to understand the Shiyabud of Klal Yisrael. This is what leaders do. So sometimes we need a physical thing to remind us what somebody else is going through. But here, ladies, I want to share with you a very interesting piece, another source that we have for the Rebbeinu Shalom being noticeable. And here we're going to get to something which I think really relates to our positions. The Mishnah in Masechah Sanhedrin says that when a person is going through physical pain, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Kaleni miroshi, kaleni mizroi. Oy, my head hurts, my arm hurts. The Rebbeinu Shalom. So he assumes kivyachol body parts. He doesn't have a head. Kaleni miroshi. Kaleni me like lighten me from my head. Kaleni miroshi. Kaleni mizroi. The Masechah in Masechah Sanhedrin. So Hashem doesn't have body parts. He assumes a head and an arm in order to say, "Oh, it hurts," so that he can understand what the human being is going through. And now comes the biggest chiddush of it all. In what context is the Mishnah talking? The Mishnah is talking about a person whose physical pain is coming from the fact that he is being punished by one of the punishments of Beis Din. That means the person did something that Hashem didn't want him to do. Hashem is punishing him, but Hashem is still saying, Kaleni miroshi, Kaleni mizroi. It's so powerful, ladies. You dock a child, whether it's a student or one of your own children, you tell them that sometimes you have to enact a punishment. But you still take a minute to feel, what does it feel like for this girl not to be able to go with her friends to the event or whatever it would be? It's not a stira. And this, I think, is the most powerful aspect here, is that Noas Ba'ol Chavero is not about agreeing with you. It's about understanding you, even when I totally disagree with you and I think you did something wrong. And I would venture to say that I think that maybe this is the problem. We're so scared to understand other people because then we may identify with them and we may get mixed up about our own hashkafos. But clearly, the Rebbeinu Shalom is telling you, he decided to punish this person, and yet he still understands what he's going through. And I want to give one other idea, and then I'm going to take your question. The Alter of Kelm was incredibly into this midah of Noseh B'Ol Chavero. And he did something once. I have to make sure that I could say this in this context. Okay. There was a funeral procession of somebody who wasn't a Yid. And the Alter of Kelm, this was in Kelm, which was not a very Jew-loving place. And the procession was going, and the Alter of Kelm turned white in the face. So the Talmidim said, "Did you know this person?" He said, "No, I have no idea who that person was." So the Talmidim said, "So why do you look pale?" He said, "I'm thinking about what it feels like to be in to get to Olam HaEmes and realize that you were being oived the wrong Elokim the whole time. That must be very hard for the soul." And he was white. If the Alter of Kelm could be Noseh B'Ol with this reality, I could be Noseh B'Ol with somebody who I don't agree with. Because it's not about agreeing, it's about understanding. And I think that this is so important for us because we run into all the time people who have ideas that we want to pull our hair out from their ideas. We can't understand why they are. And I just need to even understand where they're coming from so I'll be less frustrated with them. Did you want to ask something?
There's one thing, it's so interesting because it happened last night also when we're talking about Gaiga. We keep on going back to this idea of putting yourself in somebody else's place, but nobody has used this term, dan lakaf zchus. And I'm trying to understand why, because that's what it seems to me that all of this is background.
So I have to tell you that I was thinking today whether to pick Dan Lekav's as our topic or Nosa B'ol as our topic. And I decided to do Nosa B'ol because it's less spoken about. But for sure, part of the Nosa B'ol is going to be Dan Lekav's, meaning if I don't understand you and where you're coming from, they're very, very similar, but they also have different.
In order to be noticeable, you would have to understand why the person is doing what they're doing.
I'll tell you the difference. Dan Lekav's is sometimes very complicated when you know the person really, really did something wrong. And you could say, I'm not them, I don't have their challenges. But Nosa B'ol is, even if I don't have the time to get there, to go through the whole process to understand, I can at least walk into the mindset of a 14-year-old that the most important thing to her is that her shoes should be in style. You know what I'm saying? Like, to be down the cuffs, that not everything needs that. It's a mindset. But you're right.
I want to say one other thing that I've noticed. Part of the reason why our generation has such a hard time with no say ba'ol as opposed to, let's say, when I was growing up, is because Baruch Hashem, the Jewish nation has proliferated and we become so big that we ghettoize each segment of society, and the only way, not the only way, but a lot of the way in which our children feel good about who they are is by identifying primarily with their segment of society. But in that sense, somehow it comes out that they look down on other.
Okay, this is such a major thing. You should know that recently in Eretz Yisrael, there's been some very, very, very shocking and terrible things that are going on between different factions that got to violence, and it's even hard for me to talk about it. But I want to say that I'm going to use what you just said right now, and I'm going to take it back, okay? I was shocked. I heard certain news, things that happened, and I was very, 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 very shocked. And I was reminded of a Chazal, Maseches Nazir Beis. Chazal say, Kol haroa sota bekilkula yazer tzmo min hayayin. Now, how do we understand that? The Baal Shem Tov has a very interesting understanding of this. He says that, what did the Nazir do? By the way, obviously we know that the Parshios are Samach in the Torah, but it wasn't a live Nazir who saw a live Sota. It's conceptually, why did the Hashemon why are they both together? So we understand like this. The Nazir hears about something scandalous, something shocking that happens. And what do most people do when they hear these kind of things? They roll their eyes and they say, look what the world is coming to today. Look at how people behave. And then they walk away and you feel very, very like a tzaddik. But you actually didn't do anything to improve yourself or anybody else other than the fact that you just earned yourself some cheap tzidkos by rolling your eyes and saying that the world is terrible. The Baal Shem Tov says that what the Nazir did was he asked himself the question, where is this nogea to me? And he asked himself the question in relation to morality, to the Isha Sota. He was a Nazir, he was an upstanding person. He says, it's not nogea to me. But then he said further, but then why did the Rosh Megalgal that I have to hear about this? Or if it's not nogea to me? So he takes it a step further. He says, the only place where I cannot guarantee my moral behavior is if I'm drunk. So his personal maskana was Yazer Tzmo min hayayin. But the bigger message conceptually is, where is this nogea to me? Because if hashgacha has it that I heard about somebody else's behavior, I need to improve myself. And that's the message. So I was thinking when I heard, I think to myself, I was analyzing, how do these things happen? Eretz Yisrael is very, very small. It's the size of New Jersey. And yet there's many, many different groups of people, and we all live in our own, what I call echo chamber. You keep hearing the same opinions again and again, and you just enforce your own world where you don't really know what anybody else thinks or believes. I said to myself, where am I living in my own echo chamber where I don't understand the metzius of another person? I don't have to agree. And then I said to myself something, we're such an interesting am. We have the midah rachamim. If somebody who hashkafically I'm vehemently opposed to, if they needed a kidney, I would give them a kidney. That's the typical Jewish person's thing. But to understand their world, I won't. So I'll just throw them the kidney over this glass wall. But I'm scared to take a minute to think about their metzias. And we are more willing to give up our money, our shirt, our blood, than we are to put ourselves into a mindset. And I think that you're right, and I think the reason is that we are not intimidated by donating a kidney. I'm not going to expose myself to your deos if I give you a kidney. But to think about the fact that you haven't seen your father in 180 days and you don't know if he's alive every single night, that's scary for me to think about if my child isn't serving. Now, I want my children to be proud of their choices and to still understand the reality of somebody who goes to sleep every night not knowing if his father's alive. Because I think that that's our responsibility, is to make our children proud of who they are and therefore able, and they could disagree. I'm not talking about agreeing, I'm talking about understanding. And that's what and that's why I brought you the source from Sanhedrin. The Baruch Hashem is not agreeing with the person who did the scheit. He's saying Kaleni Miroshi Oi, as he's punishing, he's saying Kaleni Miroshi. So I do think that there's a Ben Adam Lamakom factor here. Baruch Shalom understands every single yid. And we need to not be so scared to understand, even if we don't agree. And I think that this is something which, it starts in our chinuch world. I'm going to be honest, ladies. I'm not the menahelas in Mechala. So when a girl comes to me and she talks to me about something she's going through, she's not my daughter, and I'm also not the one making the policy. It's very easy for me to put myself into her mindset and understand her struggle. But I think that the idea of being able to understand the struggle, even though I'm not the one, is much harder. It's much, much harder. But I will say that every so often I've been pulled in for policy things, which I was responsible for the policy. And I tried, it's not always so easy, to make it a point to be very, very noseh ba'ol, even though sometimes there were extreme consequences. Meaning I would say to a girl, I'm so sorry, whatever, while at the same time, mom is trying to be noseh ba'ol with what she's going through. And it's almost embarrassing for me to stand up here because I'm sure everybody here has many more examples than I have for these things. But what I'm learning from the sources is that it's not a stira. It's not a stira to enforce while at the same time being noseh ba'ol. And I will give you an example of why sometimes I think that the noseh ba'ol is even more important than letting the child off the hook. My daughter years ago was learning in a seminary called Ofakim in the Negev. And there was rules about the amount of Shabbosos you had to stay in the seminary, the amount of Shabbosos you had to leave. My family was going on a trip with my students, and my daughter was used to coming. It was like a very thing that my family looked forward to. She asked the Rebbetzin Amit is a very strong person. It's a very, very big, strong seminary. She asked if she can leave for Shabbos. The Rebbetzin said, no, you can't. You have to be here. My daughter was very disappointed with the no. A few hours later, I get a phone call from the Rebbetzin, and she has hundreds and hundreds of students in her seminary. She said, I just want to check that your daughter is okay. She seemed disappointed. When I called my daughter in seminary and said to her, the Rebbetzin just called to hear how you're feeling, what it did to her was more than 100 times she would have let her leave for Shabbos. The fact that she cared to look up my number, to call me, to see if my daughter was taking it okay, that did much more for her than getting the yes for the Shabbos. She didn't go for Shabbos, and she felt like $1 million. So I think that sometimes it's not a stira. We enforce and we show that we care at the same time. And I think that this is the concept. This is noseh ba'ol. Okay, I always lose track of time. Tell me where we're holding. I want to open up to questions, okay? Anybody questions, examples? Like I said, it's like, I have to understand, for me, this is very humbling, this whole experience. Everybody here has a big school on their shoulders, and I'm coming with my little small stories here. I'm sure you all have applications that I don't have. So please feel free if anybody has a question or a comment. I would love to hear.
Hi, Schoonmaker, thank you so much. So, people have very hard time with this. Like, even if you see students or kids, a big contributor would be issues with language. It's just a very technical piece here. But when it comes up so much, kids have a hard time with perspective taking, or always get into misunderstandings, or, you see it on the high school level tremendously, like just as they're navigating relationships and even with authority. It's those kids that keep running into this. I was just having a conversation with our guidance counselor in school, and she said that she's working with, and she was consulting with a language therapist on this, and she said this is all about language. And we were talking about the idea of fear, having to be able to imagine. If you don't have language skills, you don't have the ability to then imagine someone else's world, to go outside of your own little ecosystem. So it's just a good thing to keep in mind. Yeah.
It's very good that you're saying this because now I'm relating to something specific. Sometimes when I think about Birkos HaShachar, the word pokeach ivrim, the Moshe literally can take a blind person and make him see. And it could also help somebody overcome their blind spots where they can't see. And when I say pokeach ivrim in the morning, I often have in mind an invisible limitation that somebody has, that Moshe should help them with that thing. Because we've all had our aha moments, which means that before that we were blinded to something and then we saw it differently. And to mamish daven, the Moshe could do anything. He could help this person develop a skill, or he could help a system be developed that will help those kids overcome their limitations. I want to say something about this. Everything kind of sparks so many other thoughts. When I think about this, we have a pasuk in Tehillim, which became like a mantra for me during the war, Habotech B'Shem Chesed Yisov Vivenu. And there's a lot of different ways of seeing this pasuk. But one of the ways that we see the pasuk is that the person who's Botech B'Shem Chesed Yisov Vivenu, he attracts solutions to problems. Because it's like there's a magnetic field. His bitachon creates chesed yisov vivenu. And I always bring this as an example, that there are people doing research in laboratories all over the world for billions of dollars to solve problems of our talmidos and our children. And your bitachon, that a solution will come, can make something suddenly be proven, and a certain method or a certain medication. And that's what Chesed Yisov Vivenu does. I taught this idea, and a woman raised her hand, and she said, I gave birth 15 years ago to a child with cystic fibrosis, which has different types of mutations. She said it was not curable. She went to a doctor. This is in Eretz Yisrael, and this is the beauty of Jewish doctors. He didn't say to her, there's no cure for your child's sickness. He said to her, I want you to work on maintaining the child's health to the best of your ability, because we believe that one day there will be a medication that will treat this mutation. And your job is to keep him healthy as possible until, she says, there was 2 years ago, there was a medication approved that works on the mutation in his body, and he is now being cured. Now, isn't that beautiful? Instead of saying to somebody, there's no cure, he said, we believe that one day there will be a cure. That's what Chesed Yisov Vivenu means. I want to share with you that I had many students, because I stay in touch with my students after they're married. Many of them live in Eretz Yisrael. I'm so proud of them. They marry B'nai Torah. They raise their children. And then they get to a school system where there's 40 kids in Cheder together in the same class. I don't know how it works in your communities. And the Rebbes are putting everybody on Ritalin. Everybody's being put on Ritalin. It's very hard to maintain a class of 40 kids in a tiny area. These kids also go home to tiny apartments with big families. It's not so simple. Many, many people, whether you believe in Ritalin or not, many people say that they try it, and then it has side effects like anxiety. It's a psychostimulant. So the kid is suddenly very anxious, clinging to the mother, scared every second something bad is going to happen. So very often they try and they stop. Recently, there was a medication that was approved that was being researched to treat depression and anxiety, and they found that it also treats attention deficit. This is very recent, which means that many people, adults and children alike, who needed a psychostimulant but couldn't be on it because of the anxiety that it created, will now be able to treat their anxiety and their attention. That's chesed yisod v'venu. If there are thousands of children who will have more time for Torah because they're not getting into trouble every 5 seconds, that's the biggest chesed in the world. That means that there were some mothers who've been davening like anything for solutions. And we see this in every area, in shalom bayis, personality disorders. 25 years ago, I went to workshops that said that personality disorders are not treatable. If you have a borderline in your family, forget it. It's like a life sentence. Now they have DBT. They have different methods. How effective they are and aren't is very individual. But the fact is, I remember hearing from top professionals, there's no way to treat borderline. And now they're saying there is a way to treat borderline. That means that there was somebody who was suffering tremendously, who had a lot of bitachon, who was crying to Shamayim, and somewhere, some research came, finally, after many years, they came up with a new shita. We need to believe this. So when you're telling me about a student who doesn't have the language, we could daven that they can develop a certain part of their brain. We can also develop that some new method will be approved that will treat these types of limitations. So this is part of our bitachon. Okay, somebody here wanted to say something. Yes, go ahead.
I realized I had 1 week when I had one day 3 kids in my office, and I called. I sent a message to somebody. Please explain to me what youngest child syndrome means. And I feel it's like an underrated segment of our student body where we don't realize that there is something about the onlys and the youngest that are different than all other children. And I had this girl in my office. She was titled for disrespect. And she's sitting in front of me, completely confused. So, Mrs. Weiss, all my years, I was like this. I always spoke like this. And she probably was like the darling in the family who was very precocious, very articulate, very sharp. And suddenly she hit 7th grade, and it's not appropriate anymore. Precocious in the 7th grader is underdeveloped. And she was so baffled. And she's sitting there teary-eyed that I'm not sure what's wrong. I always was like this. Until I had a conversation and we came to the conclusion that she doesn't stop when she has something, when she has an opinion about something. Like she'll argue with her teacher, but it was like her teacher said, let's say 6 million he died during the Holocaust, and she said she read somewhere that 6.2, let's say. And she's not going to back off. And I told her that I think the problem is that it's self-absorbed. That person explained it to me. She used the key word. The key word was self-absorbed. Yeah. That they have no yardstick after them, and onlys have no yardstick at all, and they don't realize what they actually look like.
Completely. That's an amazing example.
And it was like I told her that I think you have to learn that at some point it's not appropriate anymore.
And she doesn't mean to be chutzpah.
Right. That was the punchline, because she is so sharp and she doesn't stop. And the teachers really, it was disrespectful, but it was more inappropriate than disrespectful.
We can go so many places with this concept. I often think that people are sitting in an invisible wheelchair. If they were in a wheelchair, we would realize that they can't navigate their environment. But when they're in an invisible wheelchair, we don't realize that they can't navigate their environment. And I want to tell you that so many things are coming to mind, but there's so many different areas. A woman, a former student of mine, who now has, older teenagers, recently discovered that one of her yeshiva bachrim, one of her children, was doing something that was really, really not appropriate for Yar Shamayim to be doing. And then she discovered that there were more things that he was doing. And she had this open conversation with him. And she said to him very straight, she said to me, there's one thing that I'm having real trouble with. She says, you're dressing like somebody who has certain standards. He has the yeshiva bachur look, and look at your behavior. How could you be dressing this way when you're acting so differently? And she was representing a lot of people who are very, very sensitive to the hypocrisy. You know, you see somebody doing something really inappropriate, but they're dressing as if they're Yerushalayim, and you feel the added level of disrespect for why you're faking. He started crying. Around 19 years old, he started crying. He said, Mommy, I understand you think that I'm faking. He said, but it's hard for me to dress this way when I'm acting that way. I'm not faking, I'm just holding on. He said, if I change the way I dress, I'm holding on. He said, if I change the way I dress and I rebrand myself, it will be much harder for me to get back on the derech. I am holding myself a certain way because I want to believe in my own ability to come back on strong. And he was crying. He says, I'm not faking. It's hard for me, the inconsistency. I'm just holding on. Sometimes you just have to understand what's going on. It's a totally different way of seeing it when you realize that that could be what people are doing. Go ahead. Yes.
So sometimes I hear from girls that when they're in a mainstream Beis Yaakov, that sometimes the learning is very intellectual and they're not necessarily inspired. But you're in the Chala, which caters to a Mitziyanes. And I was listening to Rabbi Elia Brudny, and he said, Kos Somar Beis Yaakov is that when you teach Torah to men, it's towards the intellect. To a woman, you get to a woman through the emotion. So, like, you're talking to us, Baruch Hashem, you're saying Divrei Chazal, and it's beautiful, but it's very emotional, and you really capture the audience. And I'm wondering, that girl who says, I want to be inspired, but at the same time, we have to teach Chumash, Rashi, Sfarnos, Ramban. How do we be no say all? I imagine the girl would love to learn like this, but at the same time, in the Chala, you're learning inside, in the Beis Yaakov world, they're learning inside, so how do we give them what they need, which is we have to teach inside. We have to be intellectual. And the Beis Yaakovs are very intellectual. But then again, you have so many girls who are saying, Rebbetzin, I sit in class and I'm not inspired. So are we just going to, what a lot of people say, water it down? Or should we continue to be, you know, and right, I just want to say what Ella Gutman said, what the Gemara is for boys, Tanakh is not supposed to be for girls. So how do you do this?
Okay. First of all, I want to say in the schos of the seminaries that I think that seminaries are moving more and more towards Torah's Chaim, which means ideas that are relevant. I'm proud to say about Mechala, my class is the only class that's a required class, and I didn't ask. I teach, it's called Chachmas Nashim. It's this. Everything I say to you, I'm saying to them. It's like this. It's like this. But when they're 18, you get them for 10 months. And a lot of what we're saying, you have 1,000 times more life experience. I'm saying it to them then. I hope it goes in the rest of their life notebook because that's my only chance to connect with them. But I think there's more and more of an understanding that people need ideas that they can apply right away to their lives. Now, for me, there's no chachma. Chachmas nashim means that I could choose the topic of the week and I could bring whatever makoros I want, but I don't have to follow a curriculum of a certain sefer. I will say that I was asked to speak at a summer seminar for a different seminary, and they were talking about this exact question that you have. And I said to them, look, part of Nosa Ba'ol with the student body is realizing that when they get off the plane and they're adjusting to 1 million adjustments at one time, a new country, a new chaver, new academics, it's amazing that anybody can survive the first month or two in Eretz Yisrael. I said, if you think that you are sitting in a Chumash class and that they're thinking about the Ramban, they're thinking about who their friends are, they're thinking about being homesick, they don't have Shabbos plans, they don't know how to do laundry, and everything else in the world. So I said, if you could at least, for the first month or two, take your curriculum and look at it from the eyes of a girl who's struggling and bring in the Ramban that happens to also be, because if you pull them in with relevance, you will get them to appreciate the depth of the Torah. You're not even just giving them a one-liner about adjustments. You're showing them how the Ibn Ezra said something about adjusting. And this is what I feel is maybe the win-win here. We stick with curriculum, but we are looking through the lens of relevance in order to dafka pick out the makor where even the Ramban related to social pressure. and there's plenty of it. The Torah is so wide. I have to tell you about myself. When I do research, I could read sometimes 100 pages of material and not pick out even one thing, because I'm waiting until I get something that I have a magnetic pull that I think talks to me and will talk to people. And therefore, I think that the name of the game today is relevance and not watering down one bit. And by the way, not every Ramban has to be relevant. But if they come out of the class and there were certain things that they had to know, but there was a certain idea that they got from the Hashem's Torah that made it easier for them to deal with their difficult teenage sister, then you got them. They see that the Torah, hafochba ba'fochba, every answer to every problem is in the Torah. That's what I would say. Stick with the curriculum and look for relevance. Again, I'm in the seminary world, so I don't have to deal with it. We do in Michlal, for example, have tests at the end of the semester. And I say to the girls, it is a schos and a good opportunity for you to collectively see a whole body of information and review it. And I say, treat it like a treat. Take your favorite drink and sit under a beautiful tree in Yerushalayim and read your notes for 3 hours, and you just now saw the whole thing together. That's how I see it. But you could say that to an 18-year-old, not when you have to give grades for report cards for 14-year-olds. Yes, go ahead.
Can I say something?
I'm wondering, I think it's very idealistic to say I'm going to make my lessons very relevant and I won't water down one bit on the curriculum.
Oh, no, that's not a paradox.
I believe that if Suda Shmita would have been alive today, this is my opinion now, it's my limited brain. If she would have been alive today and we would ask her, can I sacrifice a pie and chimish to delve into more relevance, I don't think there's any makar about a certain amount of children that have to be covered in the classroom. Is there any makar?
You're saying teach less. Yes, please.
You're not sacrificing.
Right.
You're finding relevance in that.
Right.
It takes.
Can I?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yes, this is really, I think what you're saying is not that it can't be done. You're saying that it needs more time to prepare for such a thing. Yes, I want to say something, and then I want to hear what you have to say, Rina. I want to say something about this. Two things. First of all, just the limud zchus on the curriculum. I grew up in a very, very frum home, and I had a friend who grew up in a more modern Orthodox home. She said there was no shas even on the shelf in her house. And we were talking once about, why do girls have to learn all the Rambans and all the everything? Teach them what they need to know for life. She says to me, Dina, you soaked in Avas Torah from your father. I didn't. If I don't see the Torah for what it is, I will not. She ended up marrying a massive Talmid Chacham who became a very, very, very big person. And it's because she said, because I saw the beauty of Hashem's Torah, and not every Ramban she learned was relevant. It was the Chachma of the Torah that got her. Then again, and she was 18. And I want to say like this, we can stick to curriculums, and we may have to. But we also have to understand, if the girls comes to school and what she's saying to herself is, I feel fat and ugly today, I don't have friends today, my mother yelled at me yesterday, then she's not engaged as much. If she's very, very in control of herself, she can put aside her issues. But somehow, if something that was said in that hour, maybe not all of it, if something that was said in that hour was relevant to her struggles, then she comes out with 4 Rambans that she had to know for the test and 1 that gave her a skill for life. So I don't think it's everything, but it has to be enough for her to feel this Torah is talking to me. Go ahead.
I'm very, very passionate about this, but I feel like it's true that the way we all went to school and the kids, some of the things that the kids struggle with, where you just picked a para and you just plowed through pasuk Rashi. I think that style could be frustrating to kids. However, I feel that it is our responsibility and our incredible zchus to be able to say that Torah is not only relevant, it is the lifeblood of everything that we do, and to pretend to even think that we should go around and not teach the core, the Metzius of Torah. Torah defines every life message in the world. Like to look at it and say, you could look at the story of the Meraglim and the Klal Yisrael's reaction and say, well, that's a panic response. What do people do when they're nervous? And then pull that apart. It's that everything, but it's through the prism of Torah. You look at the story, the way Revolba talks about kavod and seeing the pnimius in another person, or talk about hashkacha pratas in a different story. It's so beautiful. It's so rich.
Right.
This is how it's
Rena, I think what you're saying,
right? It's that
is that
every
the teacher
single
needs
lesson should be a life question. I had a teacher who just asked me. She says, "My kids have so many questions. So should I just divert from curriculum and do the questions?" I said, "No. Every single lesson should be designed to answer a different question, with the Torah designed and stacked in that way through the sources." Because I don't think I could do better than Revolba or Friedland.
Rena, you know what I'm thinking? I get a list when I teach sometimes on a summer program where I don't have exposure to the girls before. I get a list that says the following are issues that our students on this program are struggling with. Please be sensitive. And basically they're telling me what not to talk about. One girl has a father in jail. Another girl has a mother who just died of the machala. Another one has a sister who's struggling with whatever. And I get the list and I know what I'm not allowed to talk about. But what I'm thinking is exactly the opposite, is that the teachers should know what the main struggles of students are in general and maybe even specific, and think about how they're going to build the curriculum around the things that are on their mind. When I said to these teachers that for the first 2 months in school, the girl has nothing on her mind except for who she's friends with, where she's going for Shabbos, and how she misses her family, they were like, oh, they thought that girls get off the plane and they're ready to learn.
You know, soothes their soul. It's like there's an answer. Everything they're struggling with, Torah is the answer. All of the Mefarshim, all of the Torah, it's just amazing. You feel, literally, we're here, Chazak v'Amatz.
Totally. Maybe right? We have another topic for the Amatz for this. Yes, go ahead. I'd like to hear 1 second, I'm sorry.
I had such a situation. Not as
the English principals. I like the same thing.
Same thing for sure. Some of the things are not relevant.
Look, not everything is relevant. I remember that when we were learning English, I remember that my teacher in high school, Nurse Stroud, used to bring in things that really moved us. It was a matter of looking at
American history doesn't.
She wasn't teaching
American history.
American history is great.
Yes, Hashgacha Pratis is tremendous.
Love American history. Do the same with American history.
English.
You know what? We had an American history teacher.
I say I got everybody going here.
Can I just respond to you on the English? I once had a conversation with Rebbetzin Feinstein. I'm from out of town, so I don't deal with like the in-town stuff, so this is a different region. But I once had a conversation with Rebbetzin Feinstein about this because it's very hard for me to motivate my junior high boys in exactly that, and I get a lot of behavior and a lot of chutzpah. And what he was saying to me was that it may not be relevant in this moment, but look at what Aguda just did for the choice program for the federal government, right? Like opening up dollars in our world for education. There are so many facets that you don't even know you're going to be a part of. To be able to be well-versed, living in this country is so important. And he just kept saying that to me, like you just have to infuse that into our students somehow. I'm not saying it's easy, believe me. General studies is and out of town is even worse. So whatever you're dealing with, it's like 10 times worse. But this idea of being able to be present in America and what the opportunities that we have, and I know it's very different in Eretz Yisrael, the opportunities that we have is such an important piece to be able to instill in our students, to be able to give them that hakara satov even. Look at what we're allowed to do, right? So it is a big challenge.
That's answering for American history. What about 3?
Everything. To be able to have a conversation, right? These rabbanim that are advocating for us, they have to be able to have a conversation. They have to be able to write legislation. They have to be able to do all of these things. American history, whatever it is.
And even if
First of all, a yid has to be a shalem.
right.
A shalem knows Hashem's world. Mathematics, if you're going to learn Gemara, if your husband's going to learn Gemara, you
need so much mathematics.
Our students need to understand that we're teaching them these subjects so that they can understand Ribbon Shalom's world. If you look at Shara B'china, that's what they're supposed to do. So we have minimized it. I wanted to say another thing that everybody's going to be upset about, but this is the truth. And then I want to make another point that everyone will be upset about. So happy you're there. I've been in Rabbanos and Chinuch my entire life. And in Chinuch, and with young adults and things like that, I have discovered that every single young person that decides they don't want to be frum anymore, it is never a matter of what the Torah is and this and that. It's that they've got some emotional chip on their shoulder. Every single time. So what we have to, so yes, we have to make sure that we are dealing with their emotional well-being. But we have bought into a line, and we're all standing in that line. I just want to share this. When I was a little girl, my father, Yaakov Weinberg, taught me the Taryag mitzvos according to the Yad HaZakah, the Rambam Yad HaZakah. Every Shabbos after the Seudah, I sat on his lap, on the couch. He taught me the next thing, the 10 mitzvos. The next Shabbos we got together, I would say those 10 and the 10 before and the 20 before. Over a couple of years, I learned the entire Taryag mitzvos. Never wrote anything down because it was a given that if somebody's teaching you something, you learn it. Now, for the last 20-something years, I've been teaching Taryag mitzvahs to the girls in our high school. They come in, they have to have index cards. Each halacha, one halacha will have 5 mitzvahs, one will have 60 mitzvahs, so 50 mitzvahs. So they have to write it all down because they believe, and we have swallowed this, that they can't learn. Everybody believes that kids can't learn. And we give them that message. You can't make my child memorize. It doesn't work for her. And Taka, it doesn't work. Now, there's a problem. The technology has changed the brains of our children. But we are still Torah Yidden. Yidden learned Torah. They learned, you can't just, and believe me, I'm into the emotional stuff, very into the emotional stuff. But if there's no substance, no flow there, the emotional stuff flows away as life happens.
Right.
Oh, I was so turned on in seminary. Now it's 5 years later, and I don't want my husband to go learn. It's too hard for me. And all of those beautiful things have somehow gone out the window. And I'm not making fun of it. I think they all need it. But we have got to teach them that they are capable of working. In America, there's no more working. There's no working. You know, sometimes you sit down to a pair of shears and you literally can feel your head breaking. You can feel it in your head. I don't think these kids ever break their heads over anything.
So one of my
and their
sons
parents are protecting them.
So one of my sons just said that with all the AI out there, that the only thing that's going to be left is to learn Torah.
Right, exactly.
Because that's the only thing that you learn for the sake of learning itself. Right.
I want to respond to the comment about like when you have to, in terms of changing the curriculum and it being more work to prepare. I am shocked again and again and again when I'm preparing Chumash, the siyat d'shmaya, that like there'll be an issue going on with the class, there'll be something, a girl will have a blind spot about something that's going on, and I'll think, oh, do I have to do a shir on this? Do I have to talk to them? It will always jump out of the Chumash. I stumble onto a thing with Rav Dessler in Chayesara. It's the exact thing the girls need to hear. We learn it inside, and they don't just get to hear this is Torah from Mrs. Tannenbaum and she's telling me this and it's coming from her and that's it. They see it's the Chumash that's telling them that, and it's so much more powerful. And so the girls that really want to learn inside, they're looking inside, and the girls that have struggled with that a little bit, so they're listening, they both get the same Torah, but that they know that it's coming mamish from the Chumash, like it's all there in the sources, and it's so powerful.
We need to take your time.
Yeah, we need to take the time. I'm telling you, if you're trying, what you're looking before you find.
we need to believe
So
ourselves.
if you say, I want to find things that are going to be the lessons that we're going to hear, we'll drop them down.
Yes. I just wanted to address this question of why they have to learn trigonometry or anything else. Because I don't think we can always tell them.
She's the Kodesh principal.
I am the coach principal, but it's the same idea, which is that if you don't right now see how this will be relevant in your life, I don't think I can prove to you that you will need this. I don't know that you're going to be an accountant or work for the Aguda, or even that it's part of your shlemas, but it's part of your midos. And your midos matter in every moment of your life. Right now you have enough trials to learn this. Right now it's part of your learning to work on something that you don't understand why, and it's hard for you, and you have to persevere. But if you can do that with trigonometry or with anything else, you are building midos muscles that you will use in your whole life. And that's work for students.
I just want to say one thing. What she said was absolutely true. We are constantly saying, girls, learning and being here is you're learning skills.
Right.
This every part of the day is a skill. You're learning how to get here on time, you're learning how to daven at the right time, you're learning how to get to class sometimes on time. You're learning how to get to everything you do. Getting in front of a teacher that you like, getting in front of a person that you don't like or you don't meet. Every single thing you do a whole day is a skill. If you look at it that way, it's not so hard to learn. If you look at the skill of what the history has to teach you, look at the skills that you're learning, how they managed, how they figured something out, but if you, it's very overwhelming. The other thing that I wanted to say is I'm standing in a room with, the IQ in this room must be 400,000 Nahara, and what we do have to remember is that not every child can. The words that you said, the invisible wheelchair, has to be in our heads. We don't have the room in our schools anymore because we don't have the money to differentiate and put. We've done it too much. We put the 3 kids in another room. We're taking them out. We're doing this, but we have children who have things that they're working on, and we're not getting to them, and they want to learn. The child who has learning disabilities just needs the right key. The child who's dyslexic needs the right key, because we know adults are super successful with those problems, but how do you get the kid to understand? How do you get the dyslexic child to know Chumash? How do you get them to do that? How do you get them to love to learn? I think what we need is we want to remind them that we need to love to learn on every level. The learning, textual-based learning is great for all these very super intellectual people. Sometimes this kind of non-textual is great because they get the spiritual, but we have to teach all the kids. Let's teach all of them. From the ground up, a child should not pass 5th grade in any school, Hasidish, Litvish, Sephardish, anything, who doesn't know how to read. There should be something in place in every school that they are seen and there's something to help them. It's not patach, they're not stupid, they're not physically disabled, they have a learning disability. We need to see the learning disabilities, but we can't stop pushing. And we can't stop showing them that the answers are in Torah, but all the answers are in Torah.
I so agree with everything that you said. And I want to just add one thing as chizuk for these kids who are challenged with their learning. You know, we have the kids who everything comes easy to them, Baruch Hashem. But at some place in life, it's going to catch up to them. And this is my pet peeve I was discussing with some people here. I deal with the newly married couples, the Jungelite living in Eretz Yisrael right after they get married. And there is such struggles with the newly marrieds, with adjusting to Shalom Bayis. And here is where I find that some of the ones who struggle the most in school, who are used to working hard, To them, hard work doesn't equal a problem. Shalom bayis is adam la'amal yulad, and no seol, tov legever she'seol benurav, and echa is ol isha. And if you've had an ol in your life, then you can have a beautiful marriage after sweating through Shana Rishona. The population that I find has the biggest struggle, which sometimes ends up with being yanked home from Eretz Yisrael and getting divorced, are kids who never had to struggle with anything. And we have to build their resilience through knowing that there's life after sweating. Because people who don't ever see that there's life after sweating because they never sweat are the ones who go into shock. So I find that they always are going to have a struggle. The question was, how do you build resilience for smart girls? I find that smart people have their own issue of perfectionism. And then all of a sudden, their figure isn't perfect, or they're not as popular in seminary as they were before. And I say to them, this is a gift. The Moshe was giving you a gift of sweating now because yagia kapecha ki tochal ashrecha v'tovlach. Osher, real happiness in life comes from yagia kapecha, from sweating. And if they could just reframe their struggle as a skill. But I feel that if we get this across to the kids who don't like learning certain things, they shouldn't struggle with big things. Halavai, they should never have big struggles in their life. But the little ones make them more resilient for the bigger ones. So I think it's another way of looking at the go ahead. Sure.
High school English, and I have this conversation a lot with students. Why are we learning what we're learning? So of course I do my runaround and I explain why we need to learn what we're learning, especially the specific thing that we're talking about for this kid. But if all else fails, then you need to learn this, because right now you are a high school girl, and this is what we do in high school. And when you learn to adjust to do whatever you need to do at the time of your life that you need to do it, that's the skill that you're going to be learning. I have a friend who's also a principal today who was a handful in school, and she sometimes didn't do what she needed to do, and maybe she didn't love to learn. You said something like, we need to make every kid love to learn. Well, I love to draw. I don't love to learn. And I love to dance and to sing, and I don't love to learn. But if you're in school now, you have to learn, and that's a skill you need to learn. So this friend of mine told me that she was in one of her high school classes, she was not doing what she was supposed to be doing, and she didn't enjoy learning. And the teacher in the classroom told her, and then when you'll be a mother, and you'll have 3 little children, and you'll be overwhelmed, you'll make peanut butter sandwiches for dinner. And she said, she's a principal today, she could never have peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because she has the picture of a mom of this teacher that says, you won't live up to that, what you're going to need to do. So when we do what we need to do, it's a skill that we develop for life, to always do what we need to do, whatever situation we're in.
And I want to, you'll tell me how much longer we should go on. I just want to tie this back to Nosabel with what you're saying. When you are saying to that child, too bad, you have to learn, but you say it in this way, you're being Nosabel. Because you're getting into the fact that when people hear too bad, that doesn't inspire them. When they hear something that clicks by them as being, oh, you understand this is hard for me, you know I don't want to do it, and you're showing me why I, in my value system, think it's important, then the message gets across. Please direct me. What do you want?
5 more minutes? Okay, go ahead, yes.
Yes?
Yes.
I want to give somebody a chance in front of you. Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I want to say thank you. I want to circle back to something not related to the curriculum, but you said that, and I wrote it down because I thought it was very important. You said your primary responses have no Behira, your secondary response has Behira, and you don't have to agree, but have to understand. So I want to share something, 3 words that changed my way of dealing with people, one, as a mechanech, and 2, just in life across the board. And that is thanks to my Rav, Rabbi Abraham Sulberger. He is Chafetz Chaim, and he is the Rosh Yeshiva of Valley Torah. And anyone who knows of him or has heard of him, he is beloved by his students, by his staff. So I started to look at, after a few years of being a principal, why is that? Like, I know deep down inside why I love him, if it's appropriate to say it in that way, because I love Rabbi Sulberger, and he's been there for me in the hardest times. And I started to really take a look at, we wonder at school, the teachers that are more beloved than others, and what is it about them? And then I realized that when you speak to Rabbi Sulberger, He's the most busy person on the planet, but when you're talking to him, he acts like you are doing him a favor when you are there. If he does something for you, he acts like it's a tremendous zechut for him to be doing it. He's giving you his undivided attention as if nobody in the world exists at that moment. But what he taught me are 3 words, and they are literal. What they are, I hear you. So when you said about the neighbor, I thought about this right away, and you said about the neighbor who was complaining about the 2 naps. And yes, our first response, everyone was kind of in unison about what their first response would be. And you say, Baruch Hashem, my thoughts are private and to myself. Because we would not survive in this world if that would be what comes out of our mouth, right? But then I thought, and I often think, what would Rabbi Schoonmaker say? I hear you. And I learned that I hear you because when he used to say it to me at first, I would get very anxious, like, what does I hear you mean? You agree, you don't agree? And then over time I understood it's exactly what it is, nothing more, nothing less. I hear you. I hear you means I was really listening to you, what you were saying, and he says it in an empathetic tone. It's much better if you see it in person with body language and like the beard stroke and everything than on the phone. So I learned that you have to put some body language to it also. But I find that with friends, with my own children, with my staff, with students that are young enough, you can put a hug in there like, I hear you. Sometimes it's the teachers that are the problem and not the student. And you have to, but those 3 words, I hear you, really changed for me who I am as a mechanefet.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, I want to just give a chance to anybody who has not spoken yet, who has something they want to say, because we have to wind down. Go ahead.
I've seen it personally when I took my principal job, and I noticed my first year that many students were failing hysteria. And I used to call them into my office and ask them what's going on. So many names, so many dates, so much information. And then I sat by Dr. Rosenfeld. She's a curricular advisor in Australia. And she said that you have to come through the relevant part and teach whatever it is, Hysteria, Chumash, Navi, that way. To date, my students are 100+ students in Hysteria, and their essays are beautiful, with so much value, and it's the same amount of information. It's simply that they're coming from that direction, and when the teachers are teaching practical example, let's go to the story of Hanukkah, right? If you start with the result, right, let's look, bring it down to a relevant thing, at the difference between the doiros of the Messiah and the doiros of those that stay strong and solid and Mila Hashem Elai, right? And then they brought all the information and taught the people, the Tanakh, whoever it is around that kufa. Automatically the students did so well, and their essays reflected this, and they still are reflecting this value system.
Make the memorization.
It helps. It helps.
Yes.
100 plus. No, so we try.
Okay, our founder would like to say something, please.
To me,
go ahead.
First of all, I'm enjoying this conversation so much and this whole discussion, but I think there's one piece that I haven't heard about, and that is that to say that one of the basic foundations of Yiddishkeit is amelis, right? Is effort.
Yes.
And I want every principal here to really think, when she thinks about her Aleph students, are they the girls that are getting the 95s, the 96, 97, 98s, or are they the girls who are Amelim, who are trying very hard and getting the Bays or the Bays Plus? And I would venture to say that, and this is not a criticism, because we have a system that was created to serve individuals, and now we are serving the system. We have a system that we have to, and you all have all this responsibility, and so much responsibility in trying to keep everything going. But I think there's a major weakness in the fact that we're not really truthful in what we're saying. We consider our girls, our banos yikaros, who get the 98s as being the Aleph girls. And really, we often see that the Aleph people are the ones who are working really, really hard and getting the Bays and the Bays Plus. And somewhere,
your marks are only 50% of your report card marks. plus on her report card, because if she puts an effort in the classroom, that's 50%. Why is the mark 100%?
And the boys' world, it is different. And the boys' world, a boy that's not brilliant, but he is a masmid, he will be a super boy, he will be a top boy, he'll do a great shidduch, even if he's not brilliant. And in the girls' world, this is a very, very...
I just want to say that I was recently at the Torah Masorah. I want to say what you're saying. At the Torah Masorah President's Convention, they have like a certain challenge where people have to bring a creative idea in chinuch, and they have like a contest where they give funding for the most creative idea. So a certain idea related to teaching boys Gemara won this year, but the panel decided to award a second grant to a high school, a principal of, I think it was a high school, who redid the report cards according to be able to evaluate Midos development. Mamish, like not just Midos, like we give you grades for Midos, but to make that a very, very, very big focus. So what they're doing is they're asking the teacher to evaluate.
No, but they know how hard the girl works. They know there are children that work hours for a test that they still fail.
Right.
But there's something called Rosh.
Right.
We are judging you according to the Rosh that you make, and you're responsible for it.
I can't. It was a 2-minute presentation for a bigger idea, but part of it was giving teachers criteria to have to look for the development of students in a few different areas in order to do it. Sure, go ahead.
I had a student, I didn't have anyone like her before and not yet after. She graduated about 3 years ago. She was maximum, on a good day, 60. She worked super hard. She went to her tutor. I was in constant contact with that tutor. It didn't matter if Friday was Erev Shavuos, it was her day, she went. If it was Matzah Sikkos and it was her time, she went. If it was Chalamayit, she went. She never, ever, ever let go. We can talk about effort until the end of time, but she is a product of that. She put in so much. On a good day, she maxed out at 60. I used to tell her how fabulous her effort is and how hard she's working. At the end of 4 years of high school, I go downstairs to my dean, I said, this girl is going to stand up and speak at graduation. We're not going to have the 100, because, yes, I'm not saying the 100 also not. I actually wrote her a speech and she spoke at graduation.
Wow.
60 at max. She's a great girl today. She was given justice.
Beautiful. I want to say one more thing. We have to end. I want to say one more thing about the advantage of Nosa Ba'ol in an educational context. I have my particular situation is I give a class which is more like a shir klali. It's all the girls in the seminary, over 100 girls at the same time. And I'm dealing with these very personal development topics. So the way I balance that off is I have many, many hours for personal meetings with students who could sign up to talk about anything that's on their mind. And I have lunchtime optional chaburas where they come, they don't have to, and come and learn about bitachon. A girl once said to me something very, very interesting. I never connected the educational experience of my class with the private meetings. A girl said to me, when you meet with me privately, and I'm going to use the words now, no sab'ol, I can share with you a personal thing that I'm going through, and you're understanding me. Everything that you say in class when you're talking to 100 girls, I feel you're talking to me, and I remember everything. And I think that that is very true in the educational experience. When we are nosa ba'ol with their individual struggles, all of a sudden they feel in a class they're talking to them, and they are motivated educationally because they feel you understand them. I didn't even do this for that reason. I did this because I want to get to know my students personally, and in a class of 100 you can't. But I didn't realize that one was going to affect the other. And sometimes that 10-minute conversation you have with a student about how they're doing or reaching out to them makes their educational abilities, we're talking about memory, not memory, remembering, working, all of a sudden they have a much bigger capacity for all of it because of their connection to you. So I think that that's just an important thing. I feel bad. There's many things that people want to say. If you tell me if we can, are we supposed to wind down? Are we not? I want to hear everybody here. I feel like you all have so much life experience for me. What's that? We have to finish. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody.